Hey folks, and welcome to Solar Cabin Channel. Today I want to discuss something I think is really important, and that is the 5 biggest mistakes that new off-gridders make. And what prompted me to make this video was I went online and I seen several videos about new people discussing the problems and mistakes and foibles they made trying to go off-grid, and a lot of them seem to be disappointed, frustrated, and having a hard time about how to live off-grid. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to go through some basics of off-grid living. Maybe save some of these people the hardships and foibles and frustrations that they're feeling about going off-grid. Now, first, what qualifies me to give this advice? I've been off-grid for about 20 years now. I didn't intend originally to go off-grid. I went through a divorce and sudden illness that caused me to have a lifestyle change. And so I moved back to some family property, a small piece of family property that I owned, and tried to build a conventional house and hook to the grid, but was informed that it was going to cost me a whole lot of money in order to put in the systems and hook up to the grid and build a house that they would accept for a grid-tied system. And I didn't have the money. That's basically the fact of it. I just didn't have the money. And so my decision to go off-grid was financial, but in the first place. But as I progressed into off-grid system, I had a life-changing experience, I guess you would say, that encouraged me to see that off-grid living is healthier for me. It works for me financially for the job that I was going to be doing, and it helped me both psychologically and emotionally to be off-grid and not tied to the grid system and not have those big house payments or rent or utility bills, because I wanted to be able to live a lifestyle that allowed me to have the freedom to travel, to work when I wanted to, not work for other people, and also the freedom to explore different creative avenues like making videos and writing books and things like that. So off-grid, even though it was kind of thrust on me, it became a life-changing experience. And so I think I'm pretty experienced now, after 20 years of being off-grid, that I can offer my experience to help other people that are thinking about going off-grid to consider the 5 main basic facts of an off-grid lifestyle that you may not have considered. Unfortunately, too many people get a wild hair and they jump to going off-grid real fast without considering it, and especially if you have a family involved. That is a big step, a very big step. It's a big consideration, something that you really need to consider before you jump into it, because it can actually end up costing you more to live off-grid than it does on-grid if you don't do it the right way, okay? So I'm going to try and steer you into doing things the right way if you're going to go off-grid. The first big mistake that most people make is they think that an off-grid house and an on-grid house are the same systems. They're not, okay? Most on-grid houses are not designed to be lived in off-grid. They're too big. They have too many square feet to heat and cool. The appliances that are in them are usually power guzzlers. And they're usually not situated so that you could take advantage of solar or wind power, and they are generally in an area where you may not be frowned upon if you're trying to live off-grid in a grid-tied or grid-designed house. So, in most cases, most off-gridders design and build their own off-grid houses that are designed for off-grid use. And that's what I did. I settled on a smaller cabin. My cabin is 14 by 14 with a loft, which is just under 400 square feet of living space. It is super insulated, and it is designed with, it doesn't have any grid outlets built into the cabin. It is designed specifically for solar 12-volt system, an off-grid system, and for my system, which I will explain and show you pictures of here, is just a 400-watt system with 3 deep cycle batteries that runs everything that I need for my entire cabin. My cabin was designed specifically in an area that gets high snow and cold winters, so it had to be super insulated. And the summers can get up above 100 degrees, so I also wanted it insulated to help with the cooling. I also designed it so that it sits in an area where I can get full sun right next to the house or on the house, so that I didn't have to run my solar panels or wind turbine from a long distance away. And that's really important, because the longer you run DC wiring, the more power it uses and the more power is wasted. So you want to make sure that your house is situated so that you can take advantage of solar and wind power. The other considerations is when you're building a house is location. Are they going to allow you to build an off-grid house? Not all places want you disconnected from the grid, if you know what I mean. Government controls and loves those taxes from the grid system, and they're paying for those power lines and everything like that, so they want people connected to the grid. So you have an option of being either grid connected, off-grid connected, or you can do a combination of what we call grid tied systems, or you can use an emergency backup system. And I'm going to explain the three different basic types of systems there. For a grid tied system, if your house is already, if you like your house and you want to stay in your house, but you want to reduce your footprint and you want to be able to use off-grid systems, then I highly recommend that you look into a grid-tied system. And these are widely available now. You can even get them on payment programs so that you're not paying upfront for a big system. Be careful. Make sure that they're a legitimate system and it's actually going to save you money. Not all grid-tied systems save you money. Not all of them give you payback if you put extra power back into the grid. So carefully check that out to make sure that it's actually going to be a good system for you. But if your house is already designed with grid appliances and grid plugs and everything like that, and you're already connected to the grid, it probably makes more sense for you to look at a grid-tied system than it does to consider going off-grid. Off-grid systems means that we're disconnected from the power grid completely. We don't have any power lines running into our house. We generally don't have any utility hookups into our house. We wouldn't have a water hookup into our house, which means that you either have to have a water well of your own supply on your house, or some way that you're going to get water to your place, a river or stream running by nearby, and you know those can be fickle, so be careful there. But you have to have a regular water supply, and you'd have to have either a septic tank or a composting toilet or something like that to replace the sewer septic systems. Generally, off-grid houses are built farther away from regular towns and cities. My house is about 10 minutes from a small town. Now, location is important because you want to choose a house, a location where you can still resupply, because no matter what, you are still going to have to get clothing, some food items, medicines. You're going to need to see a doctor once in a while, especially if you have a family. You need to consider that how far away the town is where you can get these supplies and services makes a big difference in how much it's going to cost you to live off-grid. Off-grid isn't cheap if you're way, way out in the boonies and you have to drive 2 hours to get to a local town. It can also be dangerous if somebody gets hurt or gets sick to get them emergency help or something like that. So something that you really need to consider. My house is only 10 minutes away from a small town where I can resupply, get all my supplies and stocks and everything like that, but not far enough that I have to drive a long distance and use a lot of gas, because no matter what, gas is a grid-connected utility. So I'm still using the utility if I have to go get gas from my truck. Okay, so you're never completely off-grid unless you want to go like the Amish do and drive a horse and buggy. Nothing wrong with that. It may be an option for some people, but I would have a hard time getting to town and back on just a horse and buggy and still function and get everything that I needed to do, because I run a small business. Now that's the other option that you have to consider when you're going off-grid, is how are you going to make money? Some people think, well, I won't need to because I'll just raise my own garden and animals and all that. I've never seen anybody yet live that kind of lifestyle where they don't need some money coming in. For one thing, you're probably going to have property taxes still. I still have property taxes on here. My property taxes still run me, when I moved here, they was only running me about $28 a year, but since I built my cabin, they've raised it up every year, and now my property taxes are about $300 a year. Still acceptable, and not bad for about a 1-acre lot with a cabin on it. But damn those property taxes anyway. I wish I didn't have to pay them. Maybe maybe you can get property in an area that doesn't have property taxes, but you probably will. And you will still need money for incidentals and things that you may not be able to produce on your own off-grid homestead. So let's be realistic here. You're probably still going to have some money coming in. Now, being off-grid, though, gives you some options. Like in my case, I was able to quit a teaching career that I was burned out on and didn't really want to continue doing, and I started a pest control business instead. And working with the locals and build up slowly, I was able to start a pest control business. And the reason I was able to do that is because I didn't have any house payments, I didn't have any utility bills, so I only needed a minimal amount of money coming in. And it actually turned into be a very, very lucrative business because I developed a large base of customers here in the local area and was able, with that, to afford some of the systems and other things that I needed for my cabin. Now, work is important. You may need to keep the job that you're in. Maybe you love your job. A lot of people do. Maybe you want to consider switching jobs. Maybe you want to start a business. Those are all things that you need to consider before you decide to go off-grid. Don't go off-grid and then decide, well, now I'll go find a job or now I'll start a business. Think about it, have it all set up, design what you're going to do and how you're going to have some money coming in to pay for the incidentals, property taxes, and things like that you're going to have when you go off-grid. I wish to heck we could get away from money altogether and go back to the barter system, but it isn't going to happen. You may have a local area where there is some bartering going on, but it's probably small and probably won't fit all your needs, so you're going to have some money coming in. Let's see. The other consideration is the type of house you build. Like I said, my place is super insulated. It's also designed for off-grid systems. I use a 12-volt system, so I use a water holding tank that runs off a 12-volt pump. Okay, I use a small propane, and we'll talk about this. I use a propane on-demand water heater and a small propane furnace with wood stove backup. Now, that's really important. If you plan on using wood, you have to have a source of wood. If you have to drive 100 miles to get your wood supply, you're still going to be using gas for a chainsaw and oil for a chainsaw and driving your truck on gas, which is expensive to go get a load of wood. And if you have to buy wood, especially out here, buying wood is extremely expensive. So you may want to consider, can you get propane in your area? Propane has now come down very much in price. And so it's an affordable fuel and what they call a bastard gas because it doesn't have to be refined. It can be used raw, and it's an excellent product for off-gridders because you can go and get it in small tanks or you can have it delivered directly to a large tank at your place, and it will run your stove for cooking, it will run an on-demand water heater, and it will run a small propane furnace. I heat my entire cabin with just a 1500 BTU propane furnace. And my propane costs are about $1 a day in winter. That's for cooking, showering, using the water heater, and running my propane furnace. And for using my propane furnace. And so, you know, $1 a day, that's pretty minimal. $30 a month in wintertime to heat, cook, and wash clothes and shower and everything like that. That's a lot cheaper than it would be on grid, I can tell you. And since I don't have any other utility bills, that $30 a month in winter. Now in summertime that goes way down because I'm not heating, of course. And so a couple of tanks, 20-pound tanks of propane will last me almost all summer long when I'm not heating. So you know, a very, very minimal expense during the regular season. Only about 4 months out of the year that I have to buy some extra propane for heating. My cabin is also designed with a porch. Porches are extremely necessary for off-grid houses, and I'll tell you why. They should be put on the south side to block the sun because this reduces the amount of heat or amount of cooling that you need for your place. And in wintertime, that same porch can also be converted, as I do, with plastic, clear plastic, into a greenhouse, which adds heat to the cabin. So I don't have to use much heat. Just by opening up my door with my front porch covered in plastic, I'll bring in all that extra heat, and it's a lot of heat that's captured and just comes directly into the cabin. It also gives me a nice, dry, warm place to change out of my work clothes, and I also keep my propane tanks under there so they're not getting snowed on. And you could even keep your battery system and stuff out there on your porch covered in plastic. In winter will keep them warmer so that your batteries don't lose power, because batteries lose power when they get cold. So have a porch on your cabin is a design feature that everyone should consider important in the design of their house. Again, the expense of your house, it all depends on what you're going to use. My entire cabin cost me less than $2,000 to build at that time. And even with the solar panel systems and batteries that I have now, I could build my entire cabin again, furnish it completely, because it's designed like an RV, with all 12-volt systems and a solar panel system of 400 watts for under $5,000. I could do that tomorrow easily and build this cabin and put in all the systems for under $5,000. So that was within my budget. You may have a bigger budget. Maybe you want to go with a larger solar panel system, more batteries. Maybe you want to do a system that maybe you've got a water well system that requires a larger pump, and so you need a bigger system. Washers and dryers, things like that, those are all big power eaters. Now, in my system, what I use is a 400-watt system that runs my water pump. It runs my lights, which are all LED 12-volt lights, which don't use a lot of power. It runs my refrigerator, which is an Alpha-Cool 12-volt refrigerator with a compressor. It's a refrigerator or freezer. And I also have a laptop computer that doesn't have a hard drive in it, because desktop computers use a lot of power. So you don't want to be using a lot of power. You use a laptop without a hard drive in it, and then it only sucks up just about 3 amps, which isn't much. You can run your laptop forever. Now, that's the other consideration. Do you want to have phone service and Wi-Fi and internet? Most people do. I suggest you do, because they're affordable, for one thing, for most places, and it also keeps you connected to society. You can use it for watching your news. You can use it for watching TV. You can use it for watching movies. You can stay connected with your families and things like that. So the internet is an important feature. If you go too far off grid, you better check to make sure that you're going to have Wi-Fi capabilities or be able to get an internet service connection, because the towers that they use for internet are the same towers they use for cell phone service, and they're not available and don't reach everywhere. So the farther you are off grid in the boonies, the less chance you are of having a good Wi-Fi connection. And everybody today loves internet, so let's face it, it's just a part of our future. Now, for me, it was very important because I also make money online. Okay, I write and sell my ebooks online. I create these videos to post on YouTube. I stay in touch with my family, and I do a lot of research on different projects and things that I'm working on online. So for me, being online is like having a library in my house. Okay, it's important both financially to make a living, and also to keep me connected with society, and also allows me to study and research things that I want to present to other people. So you want to make sure that your house, wherever you're going to build your off-grid house, that you have internet connection, or you're probably going to be quite frustrated. Now, not everybody wants that. Maybe you're a survivalist or a minimalist and you don't want any of those things. Nothing wrong with that lifestyle. I congratulate people that can live that way, and if that's your thing, more power to you, or less power to you, as the saying goes. But for us regular people that still want to be part of society, the internet's probably a good thing to have, and it's not that expensive. That is my only monthly bill, is to pay for a cell phone and internet, which isn't all that much. I think it costs me about $70 a month to have both internet and cell phone, and that gives me the peace of mind of being able to connect with society, and also in the case of an emergency, that I could contact fire department or the police department, or call for an ambulance or something like that, either for myself or one of my neighbors or one of my friends or family members. Okay, so that's important. All right, so that's the biggest mistake people make. Number one is thinking that they can live off-grid the same way that they can live on-grid, and not choosing a proper house that is situated and designed for off-grid living. So now let's go on to biggest mistake number 2. Okay, folks, we went through biggest mistake number 1 is thinking that you can live off-grid the same way you live on-grid. Okay, and you need to have a house that's situated and built and designed for off-grid living. That brings us to number 2. You need to design your system for your off-grid house in such a way that it doesn't have to be a huge expensive system. And sizing your system is always tricky, because not everybody has the same needs. Okay, that's just a fact. Some of us have different needs in our off-grid houses than other people do, so I can't say my size system is perfect for your off-grid situation. However, after 20 years of living off-grid, with trying different sizes of systems and different battery configurations and things like that, I have settled on a small 400 watt system with three 150 amp hour batteries, and it works excellent for my situation. Okay, and that system will run my water pump, which is just a 12-volt SureFlow water pump that pumps the water from my holding tank to my fixtures, my faucets in my shower, my water heater, and things like that. I use a laptop computer instead of a desktop, which I already described, uses a lot less power. I use 12-volt appliances instead of on-grid appliances, because grid appliances are not designed to be efficient. They're getting a little better, but they're just not designed to be efficient. One of the biggest areas of power use will be for a refrigerator. We all need to have a refrigerator. I don't think you're going to eat dry food all the time, so you're probably going to need some way of storing your food cold. There's a number of different ways you can actually do that if you want to search online. However, I would suggest that you look at the Dometic or the Angle or the Alpacool refrigerators that use a compressor, a Danfoss knockoff compressor that keeps everything cold and can also keep the stuff frozen. And those now have come way down in prices. You can find them affordable for an off-grid house. If you use those on 12-volt, they use a whole lot less power than a conventional refrigerator run off of AC. They may not hold as much food, okay? That's just a fact. 12-volt refrigerators are generally a little bit smaller because they're much better insulated, and the insulation takes up some room. So you're going to have a little bit of a lifestyle change. You're not going to be able to store everything in your fridge, but I'll bet if you cleared out half the stuff that you don't use in your fridge, you'd find you'd have a whole lot of space left in your fridge anyway. So it's probably a good thing that you clear out your fridge is what I'm saying. Okay, the other appliance that you'll have a hard time running off-grid would be a washing machine, a microwave, and an air conditioning unit. Generally, we try to avoid using those things or use different appliances. For a washing machine, you can still use a conventional, and you can get 10-volt or 110-volt washing machines. You don't have to get a 220-volt washing machine. You can get a 110-volt washing machine or a combination washer-dryer, and those can run off a generator. Now, some people will say, a generator, you're using gas. Yes, I do, but you're using just a small amount, maybe once every couple of weeks or once a month, depending on how many clothes you have to wash, and you're only running it for maybe an hour at a time. To wash your clothes once every couple of weeks or once a month, you're going to run your generator to run a washing machine to take care of your clothing, washing your clothing needs. You can still all do all that by hand, folks, if you want to, if you have the time. But if you're working a job and taking care of a family, you may not find the time to go and wash clothes. It's a good experience. I've done it many times. I've even developed a barrel washer that I can hand wash clothes and actually do them in about the same amount of time it takes me to run a washing machine. However, it's not as convenient. And, you know, sometimes convenience is nice. So if you want to run a washing machine and dryer combination, use a generator, a little bit of gas, run it for an hour once every couple of weeks or a month. Not that expensive. The other thing that you may want to run off of a generator is a microwave unit. I love a microwave because a lot of times I'm in a hurry. I'm working outside. I need to come in. I need to grab some lunch. I want to fix me a TV dinner. I want to fix some frozen burritos or something like that, or warm up something that I fixed before in the microwave. I have my microwave set up so that a couple of pulls and it sits right on my porch so it stays warm. Again, in that greenhouse in the wintertime. That's really important. And you know, a couple of pulls and run it for 10-15 minutes off of the generator. Uses hardly any gas at all. A gallon of gas will generally last me 2 months to run it for just running a microwave and my washing machine. Okay, doesn't take that much gas to run those things, and you're only running them, instead of having them hooked up into your regular off-grid system where they're always draining power off of your batteries. Those things use way too much power. Run them off a small generator with a little bit of gas only when you need them, and you'll find out that you don't use them near as often as you did probably when you were on grid, simply because you will plan your use of those machines, those appliances, so that they're more convenient to you, which means you use them less. Okay. The other appliance is an air conditioning unit. Now, I know if you live in the desert, you decide to go off-grid in the desert, you're going to need air conditioning. So you're probably going to need a big system, because air conditioners they just have not been designed efficiently to be used off-grid. Now, some of the split systems that are a heater-cooler system, look into those, because those are I haven't used one, supposedly are a lot more efficient than a standard air conditioner or something like that. However, if you've designed, and this is in step number 1, if you designed your house properly with a lot of insulation and small, you probably don't need an air conditioner if you use the porch as your shade system. And I use a roof vent turbine, which expels the heat out of the ceiling, which is where, remember, heat rises, so it expels the heat in the summertime out through the roof. And then by having screen doors on both sides of my house, on both the north side and the other south side, under the porch, I can open up my doors with screens, and that creates a cross flow ventilation, so the air comes in and goes right up, pushes all the warm air right up out through the roof vent, and keeps my cabin very, very comfortable. I've never really had to have an air conditioner in my cabin at all, except when it got above 100 degrees there. For one summer, it got up to almost 110 degrees here. It was an abnormal year because we normally rarely get above 100 here. And I bought a small window air conditioner unit, put that in my window, and I ran that off my generator for just about an hour. Once, when it got really hot in the cabin, I would close it all up, and then I'd run the air conditioner for just an hour a day to cool it down, and then with everything closed up, it kept that cold air in there and kept it nice and comfortable. Now, generally, I haven't used the air conditioner except that one year. The rest of the time, I've always used just a passive cooling system with just 12-volt fans and open doors and screen doors, and the place stays very, very comfortable. In fact, in wintertime, this place can be heated with just a 1500 BTU heater, and in summertime it can be cooled with just having the doors open and the roof turbine. That's because of extra super insulation, and that's, if you're going to put money into anything when you build your houses, put it into more insulation. It's the best bang for your buck that you will get in your off-grid systems is super insulating your houses. Let's see, the other things that I would talk about is consider your systems and how you set them up should be designed for 12 volt. And there's all kinds of 12 volt appliances out there now, folks. It didn't used to be. When I was building, there wasn't very many 12 volt appliances, a few that were designed for truckers and stuff like that. Now, because there are a lot of people that are off-grid or living in tiny houses on wheels or a situation like that, they are putting out a lot more 12 volt, especially the Chinese are putting out a lot of 12 volt appliances. So go look at those. You can get a washer and dryer now that runs off the 12 volt. You can even get dishwashers if you have to have one. Good grief, wash your dishes by hand. But if you need a dishwasher, they even make 12 volt dishwashers and stuff like that. And of course, lots of 12 volt refrigerators and things like that. So if you size your system correctly, you will need a calculator. You can go online, use any of the solar calculators, plug in your appliances, and on this tag on any appliance, it will tell you how many amps and watts it uses. Plug that into your calculator to estimate how much you're going to need, and then you can size your system for that size. For me, my system, 400 watts, is enough to last me. It's charged up in 2 hours. Usually by 10 o'clock in the morning, my batteries are completely full, and that will last me. You know, I use during the daytime, I use more power, but I'm using directly off the solar panels that are already full up, so that's not using any power at all. So it's nighttime use or time when you may have low sun days that you have to be concerned about. My system is designed to give me 3 days of backup, so that on very low sun days, I still have enough power to run everything that I need to in my cabin. And that is a system that I also described in step number 1 as an emergency backup system. If you need a system, if you live on grid, but you are afraid that the grid could go down, which does happen a lot, places because of hurricanes or storms, things like that, a lot of times the power gets knocked out. Look what happened in Florida recently, and right now these places that are getting flooded with rained out, losing their power systems. You could have a hurricane blow through, tornado blow through, and knock down the power lines. Even if you're not in the path of it, you may be without power for a week or 2 weeks or a month. Okay, so an emergency backup system like my 400 watt system would take care of all your basic needs. Okay, it's not going to run everything in your grid house. It will take care of your basic needs, so you and your family could ride out a grid power outage. And so I would consider that as an emergency system, or for a small off-grid system. Either one, 400 watt, 3 150 amp hour batteries with a small inverter that can be used to power the basic essentials in your house is an excellent system, either for a small off-grid system or an emergency backup system. Alright, so that was mistake number 2. People not sizing their systems correctly. Use an online calculator to go figure out how much power you need before you size your system. In general, just a general rule, for a single guy or even for 2 people, a 400 watt system like mine is a good starter system. You can always add more panels and more batteries later, and I would impress on you to consider doing that instead of buying a big system all up front. Okay, if you start with a 400 watt system for a couple of people, you can always add more panels. You can always add a couple more batteries if you find that that system's not big enough for you. If you've got a family of 3 or 4, I would consider probably getting a 1 kilowatt system. That's probably a good starter system for them, and maybe 5 or 6 deep cycle batteries. That would be a good starter system for a family of 3 or 4 to take care of, because especially if you've got teenagers or kids that are gadget happy, they tend to use up more power. What you do is you tell little rascals, you can use that power all you want during the daytime when the batteries are full, but at night those gadgets, they go off because they use up power. Okay, and here again, this is about a mindset. You're going to have a lifestyle change when you move off grid, and part of that lifestyle change is knowing that when the sun goes down, you're now using off battery power, and so you need to conserve your power. And if you do that, your family will quickly get an understanding of when they can use power without draining the batteries and when they can't. And so, you know, that's just a mindset sort of thing that us off-gridders just do automatically. Every time we turn something on, we're thinking, well, is this using power off my batteries? Okay, now we're on to the third biggest mistake most off-gridders make. Okay, folks, third biggest mistake that most off-gridders make is not having a backup system. Okay, especially in an off-grid area, if you're going to be living quite a ways away off in the boonies somewhere, you need to have backup systems. And I also suggest this just because, as we've seen in the past, our economy can sometimes become unstable quickly. People lose jobs, people lose homes, people lose their retirement savings funds, and things like that. You could become disabled. You could have a life-changing experience, in which case you may not be able to get the money that you need to take care of your regular needs that you're used to having on grid. So that's why I recommend some basic backup emergency systems that you have in place, especially if you're off-grid. Now, you may use these as your regular systems too, and a lot of off-gridders do. I use them as a backup system, so that if something happens to my off-grid system that I can't get extra parts or equipment or something like that for, or I run out of money, that I would still be able to survive and live and function in my cabin. One of those systems is your heating system. I really recommend that you have at least a wood stove backup in your cabins or your off-grid houses. Even if you're not using it. I use propane all the time for heating because it's cheap right now, okay? That may not always be the case. It may get really expensive, okay? Or maybe there's some emergency where I can't get propane or something like that. So I have a small wood stove that is designed with a flat cooktop made by Camp Chef. It also has 2 side water containers for heating water. And you can be fed with just small sticks that I can find around my place, or I can go up here in the hills and I can get wood so that I could put that in and I could install it. My cabin is designed so I can install it in minutes and use wood heat for cooking, heating the place, and heating up water if necessary. Now, some people live with that wood stoves and they love them all the time. Wood around here isn't close by and it's expensive, so I use propane. But I do have the system if I need it there. The other thing that I would consider is washing clothes. Okay, hand crank washing machines work great. I have a video on there for how to make one out of a 55-gallon barrel, or you can buy them on Amazon now, these hand crank or pedal push washers for washing small batches of clothes. Hand washing takes a long time, but you speed it up a little bit if you use one of the hand crank washers. You wash small batches, but you know, if you're off grid and you're in an emergency situation where you need to wash some clothes, especially for your kids and stuff like that, one of those hand crank washers is an excellent thing to have on hand for off-grid living. You maybe want to use that full time. Who knows? The other system that I would talk about is water. You absolutely have to have water on your homesteads, folks. You're not going to homestead, and I guarantee you're going to have a hard time finding a county or place that will let you bring in or deliver water. However, some places do. You can use rain harvesting, but you better know how much rain you average in your area. This is again for location. If you're going to harvest rain, and you have to have some system, I would say, for filtering that water. There's all kinds of videos online for rainwater harvesting. So go and look at those, study that system before you decide, well, I'll just harvest rain off of my roof, because not all houses are the best design for doing that, and some of them can even have toxins in the roofing materials and stuff like that. So go and study that before you decide you want to rain harvest. Same thing if you're going to be using a stream or a river. A lot of times the water sources may look clean, but are actually full of pesticides, fertilizers, and may even be coming from a feed lot or something like that, where are full of E. coli and all kinds of stuff. So make sure you have your water source tested before you go building your house if you're going to be using any of those sources, and make sure that you actually have permission and access, legal access, to use any water supply like that. Just because a stream runs through your house doesn't mean that you have legal access to that stream, as some people have found out. Water wells are the most common use of water on off-grid homesteads. Water wells can be expensive, upwards of about $5,000 for a 300-foot well. In some areas, the water table may be high enough that you can hand drill a well. I've not had great experience with hand drilling wells. Some people do it. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they don't. If you're lucky and you hit a good vein, you hit a good aquifer underneath it, then hand drilling a well may be an option for you. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to pay somebody to come in and drill a well for you. That's an added expense to off-grid living. But once it's established, then you have a well. Either you can use a pump, or in my case, my well is a free-flowing well, which means the water runs, it's under pressure underground enough that it actually flows out of the well under pressure. So I don't need a pressure system, and I can flow that directly into my holding tank and then use a 12-volt water pump. In most cases, you probably won't get a free-flowing well, so you're going to have to decide what kind of pump you're going to put down that pipe in order to pull the water up out of the ground. And I would look at the 12-volt style pumps that use a lot less power, and then use a larger holding tank. And if necessary, you could either run that off of a smaller solar system, or you could run it off a generator for just an hour or two a week to fill up your main holding tank, and then you run off your main holding tank into your water. So those are your basic backup systems that every place should have, and it's something that you should consider before you go off-grid, because you're going to have times when you may need to use those systems, either as an emergency system in a regular on-grid house. I would recommend those for on-grid houses too. Or at times when you may need to use those systems because you can't get access to to propane or something like that for your off-grid houses. Okay, basic mistake that number 4 that people live off-grid, and that is deciding if they're going to raise animals, raise a garden, and if they're going to do that just to supply their own needs, or if they're going to use that as a source of making money. I really recommend that people raise a garden and at least raise chickens, because it's going to offset your expenses for food. Excuse me. It's going to offset your expenses for food, such as a couple of chickens will lay you 1 or 2 eggs a day for a single person or a couple of people. I actually have more. I have 2 chickens and I have more eggs than I know what to do with. The dang things they lay more than I can actually eat at a time, so I end up feeding the extras to the dog for make up on dog food. Okay, raising chickens is probably the easiest thing, and you can find all kinds of videos, online information for raising chickens. Rabbits are another consideration. Also easy to raise, good food product. Also produce valuable fertilizer, fur, things like that, and a good. Now, if you're going to raise these animals, you need to have a place and proper pens for them. Don't just get something crappy built and then expect your animals to survive. Take good care of your animals. Build proper pens. There's all kinds of information for building pens out there, including in my videos. You can also get larger animals if you have the space. Now, if you're going to be raising cattle or sheep or goats or something like that, you got to have proper space for those kind of animals, and then you have to consider how you're going to feed them in wintertime. If you live in an area that gets harsh winters, you're going to have to pay for hay. Okay, that's an expense that you're going to have, and so you're going to have to calculate, if you're just using these for your own use, how much you're paying in regards to food for winter in order to keep those larger animals alive, if it's actually saving you any money. In general, it does, but not for everybody. So hay prices can skyrocket. They are very fickle, and so I've seen hay prices go double, triple sometimes in wintertime when hay supply gets low. So that can be very expensive if you don't have the acreage to keep them fed on your own place. You want to be real careful in considering raising those larger animals. In some places, you may also need to talk to your local agricultural department to see what kind of animals you can raise. Not all animals are accepted in all areas, just so you know. They may also be able to help you with getting what's called a green zone tax deferment on if you raise certain types of animals like cattle and sheep and things like that. Will generally reduce your property taxes in some areas. So find out all that stuff before you go deciding to get all heavy into raising animals. Gardening, on the other hand, is an excellent use of your time and will offset your food supply. However, a lot of people don't have the proper experience in gardening, so make sure you go online, get you some experience, read some books, understand what zone you're in, understand what vegetables do well in your area. Growing fruit trees takes time. You're not going to get fruit off fruit trees for probably 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer. Nut trees take a very long time to grow. So if you're going to get those on your homestead, you want to get them in early and not expect to get anything off of them or harvest anything off of them for 3 or 4 years. Gardens, on the other hand, you can get stuff off within a few months of putting in gardens. And a basic small garden used for your salad gardens, you can buy the seeds online or buy the plants at your local greenhouse. Put those in for, $10-15. You can buy all the plants you need to feed a family off of just a small garden plot. So, those are things that you want to plan in advance for your off-gridding. But I would highly recommend people understand that you're probably not going to supply all your food needs off of raising animals or gardens. You will still need some money to have to buy incidental food supplies and things like that. So you should still expect that you're going to not completely supply all your food needs from a garden or raising animals. Alright, mistake number 5, the last one, and this is something I really want to drive that's important to people, and that's start small. Too many off-gridders try to get into it whole hog. They go buy an expensive solar system, big wind tower, lots of batteries, and they put, and the system generally isn't sized right. And that's the biggest problem that I see most off-gridders have, is they just don't size their systems right, and their houses aren't designed for off-grid living. If you consider everything I've said in the other 4 mistakes that newbies make, then you'll understand that your house has to be designed for off-grid living, and then you have to size your system correctly. And if you do that, you won't waste money, which even I did when I first started out, because there wasn't anybody out there with experience telling me how to do all this stuff. I had to learn it all on my own. It was, a trial and error sort of situation. And I made some mistakes, and we all do. But I learned from my mistakes, so I'm trying to help you so you don't make those same mistakes. Start with a small system. You can always add more solar panels. You can always add more batteries. And when you do that, you'll find that there's ways that you can reduce your needs. And that's the most important thing, is the mindset. If you reduce the amount of power you use, you'll build your system up to where it fits just what you need for your family and for your needs. And it's cheaper in the long run to start small and build a little bit at a time just as you need it than it is to go whole hog and get a great big system only to find out that it's way too much for what you need and you've wasted a lot of money on those systems. Alright folks, the last thing I would talk about is buying land. I would just caution you to check out, make sure that it's got water, make sure that it's zoned for an area where you can build houses. A lot of people find out afterwards that they can't even build a house because it's in an agricultural zone. Make sure that it's situated so that you can use solar and wind power. Make sure what the property taxes are going to be. You can find that out in advance. Okay, and make sure that you have access to a town somewhere nearby so you can resupply. You don't want to be way too far off in the boonies. Find out if there's police, if there's fire departments, if there's a hospital or clinic nearby. Find out all that stuff before you go and buy land and before you invest in an off-grid project. And don't be afraid to talk to your county. Find out what the permit process is. They may, some places don't have very much permitting. They don't require any permits to build any size, style, or house. In my case, there was a permit that had to be under 200 square feet, which is why I settled on a 14 by 14 cabin, because I could consider it an off-grid dry cabin. In that case, I didn't require a permit. You may be able to do something like that in the area that you're living in. Or you may have to go through a permit process. If you go through a permit process, you want to find out what is required. Are you required to hook to the grid? Are you required to have city utilities? Are you required to have a septic tank? Can you use a water well? All of those things have to be considered before you buy land. Don't go rush in and buy land and start building without finding out all those things. That is a big, important consideration before you go off-grid. Make sure that we want to do this legally. We don't want people to go off-grid illegally and find out later and then get in trouble, because that puts a black mark on all of us off-gridders that are trying to do it legally and trying to make it a way for people like us that want to be disconnected from the grid for whatever reason, and want to live an off-grid lifestyle, to be able to do it without having the government always coming down on us and breathing down our necks and trying to get us hooked up to the grid and causing us legal problems. So please, take the time to find out what the permit process is, find out what's necessary, choose your places carefully, choose the style of house and cabin or off-grid house that you're going to use carefully. And if you do that and you size your systems right, then you'll have a positive off-grid experience. And that's what I want people to have here. I've had a very positive off-grid experience. I'm very happy with my lifestyle being off-grid. It has allowed me the freedom to do the things that I've always wanted to do, to be creative, to run a small business, not worry about having to have a lot of money always coming in. And I've actually, because I don't have house payments and utility bills and no rent or anything like that, the amount of money that I make is a lot more, because I'm not spending it back out for all of those things. So a part-time job is enough to actually put money in savings. Something that I have never been able to do working a full-time job was put money in savings. And now living off-grid, I've been able to put enough money in savings to retire, and also to have my retirement funded so that I don't have to rely or worry about Social Security and those programs like that taking care of me in my old age. Hopefully they'll still be there, but if they're not, I managed to put enough in my retirement just living this lifestyle that I can still take care of myself and my needs, living quite comfortably here off-grid. Something to consider, because you never know when you or somebody in your family might end up disabled, not able to work, or you lose a job, or you lose that big on-grid house or something like that. So you can consider doing this in small steps. You don't actually have to go off-grid all at once either. A lot of people that live on-grid like their houses, like their jobs and something like that, but they start with a piece of property and build an off-grid house and maybe use it as a vacation place or a rental or something like that. And then when the time comes, when they're ready to go off-grid and they've got their plan all set up for a job or retirement or whatever they're going to do, then they can sell that big on-grid house, put that extra money in retirement, retire to their vacation house or their off-grid cabin or something like that, live out the rest of their lives very comfortably. That's also a very good solution. Take it in pieces, take it in small steps, and you'll get there, folks. All right, thanks for coming by my cabin. Please do come by my website, simplesolarhomesteading.com. You will see I've got all kinds of plans and my 355-page ebook or printed book, which goes into a lot more detail about all these systems and all the decisions that you need to make in living off-grid. And for $7 for the ebook, you're not going to go wrong. Use it for a doorstop if you don't find anything useful in it, but I guarantee you will find something informational and useful in that ebook. All right, folks, thanks for coming by my cabin. Have a great day.